The internet is something that we all use. It's ubiquitous in society, for better or for worse. Now, it's been my observation that over time the internet has changed from the early days to as it is now, in a lot of ways. But in a lot of other ways, it's stayed the same. And I'd like to talk in this video my history with the internet, how I've experienced it, how things have changed, and hopefully you'll get some value out of that. Hey, and welcome to this video. This is episode 16 in my self-imposed challenge series where I talk for 10ish minutes a day, every day, unscripted and unedited. And in this video, I'd like to talk about just my history with the use of the internet, to be honest, like what I remember from it. I don't really have a story with a beginning and an end in this topic, but I'll talk about some things that I remember from the early days, and I'll see how long it ends up being. It might be several episodes actually, but we'll see how it goes. So, what are my earliest memories of the internet? Now, eventually I'm going to become one of those rare people who remembers a time before the internet, before it became widespread use. I was thinking earlier this morning, how I would sort of describe the general public's opinion to the internet as it was in the 90s, that is, that I vaguely remember when I sort of became aware of it. So I would sort of compare it to how NFTs became a thing back in 2021, a few years ago. Like, now, where am I going with this? It was a thing that maybe people were generally aware of existing, but they didn't really have much interest in it. They knew that there were some nerds, I suppose, who used it, and they'd seen adverts and such about it on television or online, I guess in this case. But most people, they didn't really care. They just got on with their lives as they were. What else could they do really? There was no education on it. It was just something that existed and people knew about it. Hopefully that made some kind of sense. But yeah, my first experience with the internet that I remember would have been sometime in the late 90s, whereby, well, I remember Pokemon cards had recently become a popular thing, and that'll be a bit relevant in a second. So, I remember I was at home, and my godfather was visiting, and he was a web developer for the NHS, which was a pretty rare job at the time, I suppose, and he was quite lucrative because he's retired with a very good pension. And my father, my dad, and my godfather, they decided that I was going to make a web page for myself, and that's what we did, I suppose. He got me to crack open Notepad on the computer, and we just started typing HTML. He told me exactly what to type. I didn't quite understand what I was doing. I got the concept quite quickly of tags and such. There was no real CSS at the time. It was all just inline styling, if you know what that means. And there's no JavaScript. I'm not sure if that language had even been released yet. So we just had one flat text document. And if I recall, the site was just about me. I introduced myself, who I was. God, this is doxing, I suppose, actually. Self-doxing myself in the 90s, before it was cool. Who I was, where I lived, probably not my specific address. I can't quite remember what I typed. My hobbies and interests and that sort of thing. And I was quite young at the time, so I didn't really have much to talk about. And yeah, I had this webpage. I had to get a photograph of myself put on there, and we didn't even have a camera at the time. Like, it was kind of rare for a family to have a camera outside of disposable cameras, that sort of thing. Or those cameras you put the film in, the sort of cheap film, and then get photographs developed. I had a photograph of myself. We had to send it off to one of my dad's friends, who would then scan it in, put it on a floppy disk, send it back to us, and we then had one photograph. It probably took up the entire floppy disk, to be honest. And yeah, we then were able to host this online somewhere. And to be honest, I really wish I still had the information for this site so I can look back on it. And I don't know, it would be one of the early blogs, something along those lines, just information about me. But yeah, following on from that, I had this idea to make a site about all of my Pokemon cards. So I'd talk about the Pokemon cards I had, I'd sort of self-grade them, that sort of thing. I feel as though early on I could see the potential of the internet, because like, I didn't really fit in very well with the other kids at school, just for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I always seemed to be an outsider. But I realised that on the internet, very early actually, that there were a lot of other people, like a lot of other people, and some of those people might have shared my interests, my various interests. There were other people I could talk to about things, and this kind of just expanded my mind massively as a child. I guess I don't do that at all anymore, to be honest. I just do nothing online, apart from watch YouTube videos. But yeah, what happened next then? So let's think if I can remember. I remember being involved a lot in Yahoo groups. So Yahoo used to be one of the main search engines sort of before Google became popular. And these were just like online forums where you could find communities to talk to people about things. So like, let's say I was interested in certain video games, that sort of thing. And, well, there wasn't really much on the internet at the time other than text-based things and some images. Videos were, well, they were very rare. Oh, actually, let's talk about the next step then. So I moved onto high school, so secondary school, so the school that you start from sort of 11 onwards. And one of the things that became, of course, very popular amongst young boys was finding adult content. This was the thing that was shared around, like secretly shared around. It was a big thing, and there was very little in the way of restrictions because, well, the internet was still a fairly underground thing. It was very, very unmoderated. Let's say you were at school, there was an IT department, but they didn't really do anything in terms of filtering out internet content. When you were at your house, parents didn't really know what the internet was very much, so they didn't really care what you were getting up to. They didn't know what you were doing. Playing video games, maybe they thought, who knows. Yeah, it was very unmoderated. But yeah, the thing that we did was just like try and find different sites and share them amongst ourselves. I remember actually one of the big things when I was at Air Cadets. So I was in the Air Cadets. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's kind of like the Scouts, but for the RAF. And one of the things that everyone just talked about was the different adult sites that they found. Yeah, that's a bit weird. Maybe that shouldn't have been the case back when I was like 11. We have this Online Safety Act now, which is supposed to counter that in the UK, which is somewhat controversial. And I don't know, I guess it doesn't really affect me because I'm an adult now. But yeah, where was I going with this? And the other thing that was very, very popular was online chat rooms. And again, this is something that probably shouldn't have been accessed by children. I guess we turned out okay. It didn't really affect us that much. But a lot of search engines had online chat rooms where you could basically just join a room. I guess you could say it's like a sort of anonymous Discord server, perhaps, something along those lines. And it was all in your browser. And most of these things are just people talking about relationships and all kinds of nonsense that we found. And again, it was wholly inappropriate for children to be accessing these things. I'm not sure that children would even do that these days. Maybe they would. But I mean, nothing bad seemed to happen. So yeah, I guess that's not too much of an issue. And yeah, I realise that I've been talking for quite a while and I haven't really said much about the early internet at all. But these are just my thoughts as to what I was up to back in those days. So it was the initial website, the adult content, the chat rooms, and I would say that as things progressed and the internet got more and more popular, it was still very, very much unregulated. So let's say you were on some sort of online forum or something along those lines, the sort of almost the vitriol hatred that people would have, just the little comments you'd make, was something that you wouldn't necessarily experience these days. And I would say that that's one of the things that massively put me off of, let's say, creating content online, because things were really evolved to be not very nice on the internet. Let's say between the period of the mid-2000s and, I don't know, maybe sort of 2012-ish, people would just be really mean for some reason. And I guess my biggest fear of starting this video series and starting posting online at all was seeing the horrific feedback that some people could give. And well, I guess ultimately it doesn't really matter because I don't necessarily know these people. It's just random people on the internet, but it's something that I guess is I guess you could say it's like proto cyberbullying back in the day, and that's one of the big random fears I would have had. I suppose I've gone massively off topic with this discussion point. I really would like to put more thought into it and talk more about the early internet. I think internet Well, there is that channel, The Internet Historian, but looking at the history of the internet will be a very interesting thing in the future, how it evolved over time. So yeah, sorry that my thoughts are a bit incoherent in this episode. I really should have thought a bit more about it ahead of time, but the purpose of this series is for me to just practice speaking and try and actually get some of my ideas out there. I do find it's actually quite hard to remember my past life in some respects. Ever since my battle with alcoholism, I feel like I've forgotten a lot of things, but I also feel like a lot of the thoughts are still in there. I just need to find them. So hopefully that was an optimistic ending. It is interesting going back down memory lane, and thanks for listening if you somehow made it this far through my rambling nonsense. And I'll be back tomorrow, perhaps with a more coherent topic. We'll see. But yep, see you tomorrow.